Hi, everybody. Mitch Tanenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. Today, I'm going to give you an update on where CMMC stands. This week, a major milestone has passed. The Pentagon has handed off the current version of the standard to the Office of Management and Budget. There's a part of the Office of Management and Budget called the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, or OIRA, and they're the guys that have to sign off on the regulation. So that step, after that step, the next step is publishing in the Federal Register, and then the next step is it comes out as either a proposed or an interim final regulation. So let's talk about where they are now. The Office of Management and Budget has to approve all federal regulations. They can send it back to the agency if they don't like it for some reason, but typically they only do that because it's defective. The Pentagon has spent a lot of time, a lot of effort vetting this regulation before they went that far. So it seems unlikely that that's going to happen, but you can never rule anything out. One thing that they did, which is kind of interesting, is they ran the regulation through the Small Business Administration first before they published it. The purpose of that is to vet any issues that the SBA has with regard to the impact on small businesses. And obviously, small business is going to say, gee, there's a lot of impact, and it's expensive, which is certainly true, no question about that. On the other hand, so is giving all of our intellectual property to China expensive. So, and it may get people killed. So besides that, it's not a problem giving all that to China. So the OMB, in theory, according to regulation, has 90 days. Historically, it looks like it takes roughly about 60 business days for a regulation to make it through the OMB gauntlet. So if that's true, that's going to be 3 months. So this is end of July, end of August, end of September, end of October. So expect to look for it, around the end of October, something like that. Once the regulation makes it through the OMB, then it gets published in the Federal Register. That only takes a few days. And then at that point, there's two paths the regulation can take. One path is that it is what's called an interim final rule, which is that the rule takes effect immediately. People can still comment on it, but the rule takes effect anyway. The other is a proposed rule, and that means that we're going to go off and do the more traditional route, which is the rule goes through the rulemaking process and comment period and all that. Typically, that takes about 280 days, 280 working days to make it through, so about a year. I had thought that it was going to go through the interim final because the DoD actually cared about security. Right now, it appears that DoD is playing it safe because right now in the government, everybody likes to sue everybody, and so rather than going down that tunnel, and they've certainly have their warts with that situation or battle scars, they're playing the safe road, and they're going to go through the traditional rulemaking process. But I don't expect, if they do that the rule is going to change very quickly, or very much for that matter. So with regard to that, that doesn't impact things. Now, sort of in parallel with this, the Commerce Department at NIST is changing NIST Special Publication 800-171, which is the kind of the core of CMMC. The way the current regulations are written, the fact that it changes really won't impact much. It does not have any effect on the rulemaking process, because what it says is you'll use whatever the current version of 800-171 is at the time the contract is signed. So if the contract gets signed at, say, February, and the new version of 800-171 is out by that time, and check out our video on what's going on with 800-171, then you'll be required to comply with version 3. If the contract's signed before then you'll be required to comply with version 2. So that's really not going to have much of an impact. So let's kind of roll down the path here and say, let's say they go the proposed rulemaking route as opposed to the interim final rulemaking route. And at the same time, NIST is working on the new version of 800-171, which we anticipate will be released late this year, early next year, something like that. If we assume that they go the proposed rulemaking route, and that takes a year. So if it comes out, say, November, it gets published, there's a 60-day comment period, and let's say there's a year from that point. So it's going to be late 2024 before the rule takes effect. In the meantime, 80171 revision 3 comes into effect, and the DoD, let's say, says we're going to give you a 9-month or 12-month grace period before we start beating you up for not being compliant with 80171, the new version. Well, that actually jives very well with the timeline for when CMMC, the new version, comes out. So, if you work on the assumption that you were going to get an extra year to get compliant, don't count on that, because those two will happen in parallel. The other thing we're seeing is that the companion guide, which is the guide that tells assessors how to interact with things, is likely to be published at roughly the same time as the new version of 80171, which again cuts down on the delay time that you have. Now, if you assume that the new version of 80171 is published, let's say in February, and it doesn't, DoD is not going to take it into force until, let's say, the beginning of 2025. And in the meantime, the CMMC rule is going through its gyrations. In parallel with that, the Cyber AB is writing up all the new training materials and doing all the training, getting people certified. So that means that by the time that CMMC takes effect, the new version of 80171 will be out, and the assessors will be assessing against the new version of 80171. So just understand there's about 37% more controls in the new version. So, if you are completely ready to have all your ducks in a row and have a strong likelihood that you'll pass, then it makes sense to go off and get scheduled now for an assessment before it changes, because it's going to be easier. On the other hand, the problem is going to be, currently there are 46 C3PAO organizations. These are the assessor certified third-party assessor organizations, and they're doing everything in parallel with the government. So the government is really a bottleneck, but they have only assessed 88 organizations at this point. If you assume that there's 300,000 defense contractor businesses, 88 is not a really big number, and so that's a problem. What's going to happen is, come early 2025, people will get this is actually real. People will get that they actually will not be able to bid on contracts if they don't have their certification, and now they're going to be panicked trying to get their certification. Well, let's assume that instead of 46, let's assume there's 460, which is pretty reasonable, actually. I mean, that's possible by the end of next year. And there's still 300,000 defense businesses. If you assume that an assessment organization can do, this is pretty generous, let's say 10 assessments a month, there's 460 of them. So that means you can do, let's say, round numbers, 5,000 a month. How long is it going to take to get through 300,000 businesses? And remember, all the people who currently have assessments done, they're going to need to get reassessed in 3 years. So long before we get to the bottom of the queue, we're going to add the people whose assessment expires back into the queue. So suffice it to say that there's going to be a long waiting line. My suggestion is to get ready now, so that and it'll take you a year to get ready. So just understand that going in, and so that when things actually sort out, the dust settles, you have a clear picture of what's going on, you can get on the list early, and maybe you only have a couple of months wait, as opposed to maybe a year, maybe two. If you don't have the certification, the way the regulations are written right now, if the certification is required for the contract, you will not get awarded the contract. Even if you are the best, most qualified, lowest cost bidder, you will not get the contract. Because if they do give it to you and you're not certified, then there will be a bid protest, and then you'll wind up getting dragged into court, and you'll lose the deal, because the law is pretty clear about that. So, if you're hesitating to start getting ready for homeowners, I would not go off and get us, pay anybody to assess you at this point. Still too much of a moving target. But what you want to do is you want to be ready so that as soon as the time comes, you have all your ducks in a row, all the documentation, everything's understood, and you can then immediately get on the list, as we get close to that date when we think things are going to be sorted out, so that you won't wind up being at the end of the list. If you want a gap assessment, we absolutely can do that for you today. I recommend that if you haven't had one done, kind of give you an idea of where the long tent pole is in getting compliant. And if you have questions, obviously reach out to us as well. But until next time, stay safe.
Turnkey Cybersecurity and Privacy Solutions offers the complete cybersecurity program for small to medium-sized businesses. They include everything needed to secure your business and meet compliance requirements. Visit our website at turnkeycybersecurityandprivacysolutions.com to learn more.